We've refused, we've been reluctant to trade with each other, to see and recognize each other's worth. We've come to that point, that inflection point in our history, when we must recognize that we need each other.
Antananarivo, Madagascar, August 2025. Southern African nations have just dropped a geopolitical bombshell. United under South Africa's lead, they declared their intent to build a new world order, even threatening to create parallel institutions to replace the UN, IMF, and World Bank. The world is stunned. But why would such a historic moment happen here, on the island of Madagascar? And why now, of all times? Let's find that out. The Indian Ocean has just witnessed what could be the most consequential political gathering of Africa in the 21st century. From the capital of Madagascar, African leaders, primarily from Southern African nations under the SADC banner, have announced their intent not only to resist Western pressure, but to fundamentally reshape the architecture of global governance. The communiqué they released was unlike anything seen before from the continent. It was not a polite appeal for reform or a request for recognition. It was, in the words of one diplomat present, a declaration of African sovereignty on the global stage.
We've allowed ourselves to fall into a trap of self-loathing, where we've hated not just ourselves but our neighbors on the African continent. We've refused, we've been reluctant to trade with each other, to see and recognize each other's worth. We've come to that point, that inflection point in our history, when we must recognize that we need each other. We need each other desperately as African countries, as Africans. We must reach out. We must reach out across barriers, across boundaries, across barricades, and find each other, and lean on each other, and hold each other by the hand as we strengthen, deepen intra-Africa trade. That's our only means of survival. We've spoken on this. There's been a lot of political rhetoric around these issues. We are at that point where words must now translate into tangible deliverables.
The language of Botswana President Duma Boko was deliberate and striking. The leaders also rejected unilateral sanctions as tools of political coercion, condemned what leaders described as selective enforcement of international law, and pledged to accelerate regional and continental trade systems that bypass the US dollar. Most explosive was the clear warning: continental financial clearing system and trade mechanisms that would operate outside Western-dominated frameworks.
This rallies us to accelerate our efforts towards an industrialized, resilient region where citizens have food and nutrition security, as well as energy self-sufficiency. I am encouraged by the progress we have made in the stewardship of our shared natural resources. The SADC Trans-Frontier Conservation Area International Conference and Summit, which was held in Harare this May. The gathering provided us with an opportunity to reaffirm our combined commitment to the sustainable utilization of our God-given resources for the benefit of our local communities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the integration we envisage heavily depends on our ability to develop infrastructure which facilitates the free movement of our people, capital, goods and services across our borders. Major milestones have been recorded in implementing high-impact regional infrastructure projects. However, the development of strategic corridors, one-stop border posts, and digital infrastructure must remain top priority in our region. The full potential of our regional bloc has regrettably been largely inhibited by budgetary constraints. It is important and imperative that our SADC region urgently comes up with inventive and sustainable sources of funding. In this regard, let us not shy away from tapping into partnerships with the private sector, our diaspora, and other non-traditional sources. The SADC Regional Development Fund is a low-hanging fruit which, when operationalized, will provide alternative financing for critical infrastructure projects.
Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. Africa's future must be built on the empowerment of its youth and women. Without that, no talk of flipping the order can survive beyond rhetoric. The statistics are staggering. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth, with over 60% of its population under 25. By 2050, 1 in 3 young people globally will be African. This demographic wave could either be a curse, feeding unemployment, migration, and instability, or a blessing, propelling innovation, productivity, and cultural dynamism. Leaders in Antananarivo framed it bluntly: if Africa fails its youth, all else collapses. If it empowers them, no external force can hold it back. Women, too, were placed at the center of the conversation. Long the backbone of African agriculture, markets, and families, women remain underrepresented in decision-making. Yet, as delegates noted, no continent can talk about sovereignty while sidelining half its population. Several leaders emphasized that Africa's resilience through centuries of colonialism, slavery, and structural adjustment was sustained by women, often invisible but essential. Now, their role must be made visible, formal, and central. This wasn't framed as charity or token inclusion. It was presented as a strategy. A continent that can harness its youthful energy and women's leadership doesn't just catch up to the world, it sets the pace for it. Examples abound: young African tech entrepreneurs driving fintech revolutions, women-led cooperatives transforming agriculture, grassroots climate activists spearheading sustainability projects that global NGOs later copy. Antananarivo's message was clear: Africa doesn't need imported blueprints. It already has talent, ideas, and resilience. It only needs systems that allow them to flourish. And here lies the second half of the argument: African solutions to African problems. For too long, crises on the continent, whether in health, security, or development, have been met with prescriptions drafted in Western capitals. The result has often been dependency, not resilience. The Madagascar summit pushed back, insisting that only Africans can design solutions that reflect their realities. Whether in addressing insurgencies, managing debt, or adapting to climate change, homegrown approaches are more sustainable than externally imposed fixes. Take the example of security. Western interventions in the Sahel have largely failed, entrenching cycles of instability. In response, African nations are increasingly building regional defense initiatives that rely on local knowledge and collective responsibility rather than foreign boots. Similarly, in agriculture, locally designed innovations like community seed banks and climate-resilient indigenous crops have shown more promise than donor-driven industrial projects. The message coming out of Madagascar was not isolationism, but ownership. Partnerships are welcome, but not at the cost of agency. Leaders argued that empowering youth and women is not only a domestic necessity, but also Africa's greatest bargaining chip on the global stage. If the continent can demonstrate that it is building prosperity from within, by mobilizing its people and solving its own crises, it flips the narrative from victimhood to leadership.
We also need to enhance the representation of women, the youth, and persons with disabilities in all socioeconomic and political endeavors in our region. Your Majesty, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, collectively, we realize success in developing institutions that underpin democracy and good governance. Together with His Excellency Advocate Boko, President of the Republic of Botswana, we commissioned the construction of a regional logistics depot in Botswana. The facility plays an important role in enhancing our preparedness and response to conflict and humanitarian emergencies. We remain grateful to the government and people of the Republic of Botswana for supporting this project. Member states are urged to equally provide the requisite funding to ensure the timely completion of this critical infrastructure. The peace and stability prevailing in our region is worth applauding, as reflective of our joint obligation to silencing the guns. I commend the outgoing chairperson of the organ, Her Excellency Dr. Samir Hassan, and the organ troika member states for their gallant work over the past year for the realization of durable peace and security in our region. We have remained steadfast in our commitment to ensuring peace to the eastern parts of the DRC. We appointed 5 former heads of state to facilitate inclusive dialogue, build trust, and peace-building initiatives. We welcome the outcome of the joint SADC-EAC summit held earlier this week and the African-led peace process, which reinforce our philosophy of African solutions to African problems. The peace agreements brokered by the USA and Qatar are welcome and complement our African-led processes towards peace, stability, and development in Eastern DRC.
Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. For all the bold declarations and strategic maneuvers in Madagascar, one theme cut through every speech and side discussion: Africa cannot transform the world order without the participation of its own people, every African, everywhere. This was not diplomacy as usual. It was a call for help, but not in the traditional sense of foreign aid. It was a call inward, directed at Africans themselves, urging them to see the continent's struggle as their own. Leaders framed the summit not only as a geopolitical pivot, but as an existential rallying point. Africa, they argued, needs its scholars, entrepreneurs, farmers, scientists, soldiers, and cultural leaders working together to create an unbreakable chain of resilience. One president reportedly told the room, "We can resist sanctions, we can defy pressure, but we cannot win if our people remain divided, by tribe, by class, by borders, or by the Atlantic Ocean separating us from our diaspora." The inclusion of the diaspora was deliberate. With over 200 million people of African descent living outside the continent, from the Americas to Europe, Africa's struggle for sovereignty resonates far beyond its borders. For centuries, the diaspora has carried Africa's culture, fought against slavery and colonialism, and contributed to global movements for justice. Now, leaders are asking them to bring that strength back home through investment, advocacy, technology transfer, and political pressure in Western capitals. What made this appeal powerful was its framing. It was not a romantic plea for Africans abroad to return in the way Pan-African dreamers once imagined. It was a practical demand: leverage your positions in finance, academia, technology, and politics to strengthen Africa's hand. Whether by challenging unfair narratives in Western media, investing in African startups, or lobbying against exploitative trade laws, the diaspora has tools that Africa's governments alone cannot wield. Inside the continent, the call was equally urgent. The Madagascar summit exposed a paradox. Africa speaks of unity, but internal fractures often stall progress. Ethnic divisions, partisan rivalries, and class inequalities frequently dilute continental projects. By declaring that Africa needs every African, leaders were essentially admitting that sovereignty cannot be won by governments alone. It requires citizens to see beyond narrow interests and align with a collective project of liberation. The urgency of this call for help comes from the recognition that external challenges are multiplying. Sanctions, climate shocks, foreign interference, and debt traps all threaten Africa's fragile progress. No single government can withstand these pressures alone. But a united continent, mobilizing every African brain, hand, and resource, becomes far harder to push aside.
Hundreds of thousands of our citizens across the breadth, the length of the African continent are still caught in the hellish death grip of poverty and unemployment. Africa is in distress. It is calling out to each and every one of us. That cry of distress is a call to the rescue. And we must rise here and now and into the future and respond to that cry of distress. And so we are here today to carve pathways from the inalterable circumstances of our existence with an appreciation that the institutions, the ways in which we've organized ourselves, are routinized and are collectivized, are stylized modes of behavior, must give way to transformative, radical, progressive ideas and actions. And with those few feeble words, let me exhort the whole SADC and indeed the whole of the African continent to action.
So, what began in Madagascar in August 2025 was more than a summit. It was a warning shot to the old order, a declaration that Africa would no longer wait at the door of global power, but would instead start building its own house. It was a reminder that geography is destiny, that sanctions can backfire, that young people and women are not side notes but the foundation, and that no African, whether in Lagos, Johannesburg, Kingston, or Chicago, can afford to stand aside. The communiqué from Antananarivo may read like policy, but in truth it was poetry written in the language of sovereignty. It was a continent saying, "We are tired of being told who we are and what we deserve." For the first time in generations, Africa's leaders, its youth, and its diaspora were spoken of in the same breath, not as fragments scattered by history, but as pieces of a whole finally ready to move together. And yet, the hardest work is still ahead. Building parallel institutions will test Africa's endurance. Empowering every citizen will test their courage. Uniting beyond borders will test its maturity. But if Madagascar proved anything, it is that Africa has crossed the line between waiting and acting. The world should take note. Africa is no longer asking for space in the order that exists. It is demanding, and if denied, It will create a new order where its voice is not an echo, but a drumbeat. Whether that terrifies or inspires depends on which side of history one is standing on. One question now lingers above all others. When the history of the 21st century is written, will Madagascar be remembered as the place where Africa declared its future, or where the old powers realized, too late, that the world had already begun to flip? Let us know in the comments section. Can Africa be saved? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.